Hi Year 10, we're finally at the last video of our Smart Dance acronym series. So we're doing the T, which stands for training. So one of the most important things in following our safe dance practice is ensuring that we're training adequately enough that we are able to perform all our movements safely and confidently. So training for dancers will include what they do in class, so their specific dance training, as well as extra training that they can do kind of outside of the classroom as their general fitness training. Training is super important in terms of safe dance practice because it's enhanced through the physical preparation for the body, allowing us to kind of get our optimum results and perform to our maximum, and allowing our body to really be prepared and properly looked after to then be able to execute the movements well. We do need to be careful that we are training specifically to our age, and of course also working within our own body types. Dance, just like with any other sport, will benefit from the principles of training being applied to aid in the preparation for the dancer. So the rest of this video will kind of go through the four different principles that we're going to focus on, and kind of explain them and talk about how they will be applied by us as dancers. Four principles of training that we're going to talk about are progressive overload, reversibility, specificity, and warm-up and / cool down. Progressive overload. This kind of allows us to find continual improvement as a dancer. So in order to improve our strength, our flexibility, and our cardiorespiratory endurance, we need to continually kind of overload the body. Because if we don't kind of overload the body consistently, we sit at the same level of performance. But this overloading needs to happen gradually over time. So we don't rush it. It's small, progressive overloading as opposed to throwing a whole lot of extra repetitions or movements onto ourselves. So we can do this in lots of different ways. So we can increase the intensity, the difficulty, or the complexity. For us, it might mean doing an exercise faster. It might mean adding an extra arm or making something a little bit more complex. The other things that you can do is increase the frequency in which you do it. So it might be that you only used to ever do sit-ups during your special ab workout that you only do in your jazz lesson. But then you can add it on another day, maybe at home. So it's increasing the frequency that you do it. The other thing that you can do is increase the duration, so how long you do a certain thing for. So we could use the example of a balance in ballet. At first we might just work on 5-second balances and then slowly take it up another second before progressing all the way to 10, 20, 30 seconds. We're not trying straight away to do the 30-second balance, but we're progressively working our way to the 30 seconds. About in our own lessons that we've been doing in dance, one of the ways that we have used progressive overload is with our push-ups. So firstly, obviously we've worked on the complexity of the push-up or the difficulty of the push-up, moving from on our knees to a full push-up. And then obviously once we are hitting our 10, then we're trying to go for the 11, and once we're achieving the 11, we're slowly moving to the 12. So we're progressively adding on. Another thing that we could talk about in our own lessons is our abdominal work. We've slowly made that more complex, and if we were to do it every day, we would definitely find a form of improvement in that kind of strength in the abdominal area. Second principle of training that's really important to understand as a dancer is the principle of reversibility. So any gains that we can make in our training can just as equally be lost. In fact, generally, half the time it took to actually get the skill, we can lose it in. So if it took us 2 weeks to be able to do 10 push-ups, then in a week we will lose some of that gains. So if there's any break in our dance training, we will find that we will start to reverse some of the gains that we've made. And we've all experienced that one over the summer holidays, where most of us have 6 weeks off dancing to the same extent that we do normally during the term time, or even in the 2-week school holidays. And we'll find that things that were quite easy at the end of the year are quite difficult when we come back to training at the start of the year. And like I said, unfortunately, the losses generally occur much faster than their gains occur. So it's important to try and keep up our skills training as much as possible. Of course, rest is important, but we can always do little things to kind of touch on certain skills for our dance practices. The principle of training that's quite important for us as dancers is the principle of specificity. And that's talking about the degree in which the training program resembles the requirements of the actual performance. So it kind of means that we've got to make sure the skills we're training are actually relevant to that we intend to do in our dance performances. So it's as simple as we need to make sure that if our dance has a lot of rolls in it, that our training exercises are focusing on that kind of thing. As well as we've got to make sure if we're doing a ballet dance, we're doing a ballet warm-up, a jazz dance, a jazz warm-up. We're training those specific skill sets that we need to execute the movements for whatever style of dance that we're doing. So we've got to make sure that within our warm-up onwards that we're keeping it all specific to the gains that we want to achieve by the end. So the warm-up, the center work, the progressions are all snowballing towards our final dance piece. And we're ensuring that those elements and those skills are all then adequately prepared for. So we've got to make sure what we're doing is specific to the end goal. The principle of training that we're going to cover is warm-up / cool down. So obviously we'll split it into two because each one has a very, very different purpose. So starting with warm-up, so we should know by now that warm-ups are really there to prevent injury. So we're preventing those muscles and those joint injuries. We're going to increase the range of motion in our joints. We're going to increase the blood flow throughout the body. We're increasing the synovial fluid in our joints to allow them to be lubricated so they work really well. We should know by now it's called a warm-up, so our body temperature is going to increase. We're also going to get mentally prepared for our class and be ready and kind of in the room and aware of anything that's going on in our body on that particular day. And of course, just as I talked about in specificity, the warm-up should be very specific to the class in which you are about to do. So if there's a whole lot of leg work in that class, then it really, really is important that the warm-up is adequately warming up those legs just as much as the rest of the body. So if we think about a tap dancer is going to focus on really, really different things in their warm-up to what a contemporary dancer would be working on. So that warm-up is just absolutely vital for preventing any injuries later in class. Then cool down. So cool down is returning our body back to that steady state that it was before we started our class. It's relaxing our body and we're stretching out those muscles. We're also preventing the blood from pooling in our muscles and removing any lactic acid from the muscles. And you should know by now that the lactic acid pooling in the muscles is what causes our soreness in our muscles. So a good cool down is going to help us obviously not be sore the next day and then allow us to engage properly in our dance class the next day. So cool down is really, really important to stop that kind of short-term muscle pain and muscle soreness. So warm up and cool down, the two bookends of the dance class, they should be non-negotiable. We should be doing them every single lesson without fail to look after ourselves as dancers, to make sure that we can engage in our optimum amount of classes that we want to be doing. We'll be looking at training in a little bit more depth, in particular looking at the idea of adjunctive training. So training that we can do in addition to our normal dance training that can benefit us as dancers, so help with that strength in different areas of our body. So we'll be going into that in more depth and actually experiencing it physically as well to help us grow and learn as dancers. I have a few little tasks to do in relation to some of the principles of training that we've talked about. So we're going to firstly do an exercise based on specificity. So I want you to think about, and it kind of fits in warm-up as well, a warm-up and a basic class structure that you could do that will best benefit an endpoint. So you can choose whether it be for a ballet class, a jazz class, a tap class, a hip hop class, and then think backwards. So what skills do you need at the end? So then what needs to be included in your class? So you're going to essentially just design a basic structure of a dance class that is specific to the skill set that you need to do in the dance. Second thing you're going to do is think about progressive overload and think about a skill that perhaps that you are struggling with. It could be a pirouette, it might be push-ups, it may be off-center tilt. There's a whole range of different skills that you could think about, and think about the way that you could apply progressive overload to that skill to help you get better at it. So to use my example of a pirouette, you might have to break the skill down into a few different little components to get the end goal of a triple pirouette perhaps, or even just a single pirouette if that's something that you want to work on. So you have a few different tasks to think about, and then, as I said before, we'll then start to look at how then we can use adjunctive training, extra training, to even further benefit ourselves to ensure that we have the strength that we need, as well as the cardiovascular fitness that we need as dancers. So get started on those tasks. Thank you for listening to me throughout all these little tutorial videos. I hope you've enjoyed a little bit of a different way of learning rather than just kind of reading notes. I'll see you back at school after I'm back from my little bit of leave, and I'll see you then.